Hello and welcome to another edition of Making Life Better. I'm Mike Gonzalez. You know, if you've been listening for a while, we've been doing a series we pick a topic, we do a series. I think the series that we're about to explore is probably one of the most important ones to me, and I'm going to share it with you. Let's see, if you are in a place where you need breakthrough, if you've been experiencing maybe something in your life that seems to have stopped and won't go any further, no matter how long and how hard you pray, no matter how many people you consult with. If you're going through things that prolonged or chronic unemployment, chronic things, no matter what you do, things won't change. Well, there is a Christian discipline that's been around for a very long time, and it's called prayer and fasting. Now, before you fall completely asleep, because this is something you never do, prayer sounds like something you might approach. You might do a little bit of that. But fasting, Mike, does that mean going without food? Well, yes and no. I'm going to tell you some things about prayer and fasting that I've learned from my time in the Word, walking with the Lord, and some things from practical experience that perhaps would be more practical, more beneficial to you because I've tested these things. They work. It's not something I bought a book. It sounded really neat. It was on the top 10 bestsellers. I read it. I know all there is to know about fasting. You know, fasting and prayer can be compared to the natural discipline of talking and listening. Prayer being the talking part and listening being the fasting part. If you're going to engage in conversation with someone, you're going to have to talk so they can understand you, so they can know what's on your mind. And you're going to have to listen if you're going to know not just what they say, but what they mean by what they say. It's communication. It's interactive communication, talking and listening. Well, on spiritual terms, talking and listening can be looked at as prayer and fasting. Now, there are a lot of ways to look at prayer and fasting, but I want to share something in the series that we're about to do that I believe is fiercely practical. We can talk about prayer and fasting because there are probably hundreds of books on prayer and fasting, and I don't want to get us completely weary trying to fill our heads with knowledge and not fill your life with practical experience in the discipline of prayer and fasting. So, just for the sake of the time that we're spending together, I want to give you a definition that I'm going to use, that I'm going to explore, and I want you to at least copy this down so that when you hear, oh, when Mike's talking about prayer and fasting, this is what he means. He's not just talking about, oh, you know, now I lay me down to sleep, I prayed. Okay, fasting, I went without food from breakfast to lunch. No, that's not what I mean by prayer and fasting. Prayer and fasting, get this definition now. Prayer and fasting is an intensely focused, structured, and intimate interaction with God for the purpose of seeing what you would otherwise not see, hear what you otherwise would not hear, do what you otherwise couldn't do, have what you otherwise would not have, and this is what's important, to make happen things that would not otherwise happen. That is what goes on when I'm talking about prayer and fasting. Prayer and fasting is something that I've had to do when normal prayer didn't seem to work. Fasting is something I never did because I couldn't think of any reason to go without food. I mean, why miss a great meal? Fasting is the stuff that most Americans do when they have to take a blood test and they say, well, you need a fasting blood test. That simply means that you didn't eat since supper. No, I'm not talking about that kind of fasting. I'm talking about a deliberate discipline of talking to God. Yeah, prayer is talking to God. Prayer is not meditating and talking to yourself. Prayer is not talking to the universe. Prayer is not directing your conversation to some focused object. No, it's simple. It can be similar to picking up your telephone, and you know that in your phone you have all kinds of numbers in that phone. Those numbers connect to people. You don't just pick up the phone and dial anybody and say anything for any purpose. No, when you pick up your phone, you know that you're talking to someone on the other end deliberately to accomplish something on purpose. So prayer and fasting is a deliberate interaction, an intensely focused interaction with God. Prayer and fasting. The fasting part is intense listening, paying attention to things that you would otherwise not hear. We used to play a game with my older kids to talk. This is how I tried to explain fasting. You know, they were obviously attentive to that part where you skip meals. You know, they understood that part. No food. And to try to explain the purpose and the benefit behind it is what happens when you turn down the noise and turn up your sensitivity to things that were there all the time, but you couldn't hear them. We used to play a game where we would sit in our living room, and we do this at night, so that we turn off all noise. We turn off the TV, we turn off anything making noise in the house, and we turn off the lights, and we sit there in the living room. Now, of course, the kids thought that was a little weird. I mean, how many families do that? But I was trying to teach them what happens when you pray and when you fast. So we would get the lights off, we would turn on the noise, and we would sit there in the living room. And I'd say, now, give it a few minutes. Be absolutely quiet. Don't make noise, don't giggle, don't talk to each other. And I want you to tell me what you begin to hear. To my delight, they were getting the point, because we get quiet for 1 or 2 minutes. Felt like an eternity, because people just don't get quiet. I mean, there's something we just don't do in our culture. We're always moving, always talking. Something's always going. Something's always making noise. We do our homework with noise in the background, and you know, there's always got to be noise. And we are just physically not disciplined to be quiet. You would be amazed at what you can hear when you get quiet. So we would get quiet for about a minute, and the kids would say, and I would hear something, and I'd try to draw their attention to it. We get quiet for a minute, and I'd say, did you hear that dog barking? And to their surprise, their eyes wide, yeah. And I said, now, pay attention. Did you hear that car drive past our street? Be quiet even a little bit more. Can you hear voices coming from the other houses? Now, what I'm getting at is all of those things are always going on, but in your busy activity, you don't hear them. And it's just as though they're not there if you're not paying attention to them. Prayer is talking to God. The same way that you would pick up a phone and deliberately dial a friend with the intention of talking to that friend, you pray with the intention of being heard by the Lord. But because God doesn't have a telephone, and because God doesn't speak from heaven with a booming voice so that we can hear it with our ears, He's put something inside of us that's designed to hear His voice, and that is His Spirit. It's not your mind. I'm not talking about concentration and sharpening your mind so you can pick up things. No, the Spirit of God literally dwells in the believer, in the Christian. It's deposited there. It's not something you were born with. It's not something you can exercise and get. It's given. God puts His Spirit into the new believer. When you're born again, you become a new creature, and part of that newness is the presence of His Spirit. And I'm going to talk about the empowerment or the baptism of the Holy Spirit. I just want to talk about and draw your attention to the fact that fasting is being able to hear the voice of the Lord. And you won't hear it from the outside in, you will hear it from the inside out. If you're just tuning in now, I'm working about prayer and fasting, and I'm going to give you my definition again so you can write this down. Prayer and fasting is an intensely focused, structured, and intimate interaction with God in order to see what you cannot otherwise see, hear what you otherwise cannot hear, do what you otherwise cannot do, have what you otherwise cannot have, and then to make happen in the earth things that would not otherwise happen. That is the practical outcome of the kind of fasting and prayer that we're going to discuss on this series. My children, after playing our little game about what can you hear when the lights are out in the house and it's dark, you can't see each other, you got to be really quiet, and those were the ground rules. It's amazing how sensitive to their surroundings they became when they continued to practice doing that. And when you pray and fast, the practical outcome is that you're going to be comfortable having a conversation with God. Now, a lot of people talk to God. Sometimes they talk to a God they completely make up. Sometimes they talk to a God that's their mind, their conscience. I'm not talking about any of that stuff. I'm talking about a prayer and fasting discipline based on a relationship with the living God, the one revealed in the Bible, the God of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, the God that Jesus represented, God with us, that God. That's the one I'm talking about. I'm not going to take the time during our series to explore fasting in other cultures and other religions. I can't speak on that. I have no experience there, and if I'm teaching you anything, it would be something I'd have to read in a book. I'm teaching you prayer and fasting from personal experience and from what I've learned over many, many years of study with the Bible. The same Bible that you can get and the same experience that you can have. One of the neat things about prayer and fasting is that anybody can do it. You don't have to be super genius, super spiritual. If you can talk, you can pray. And if you can listen, you can fast. Now, I want to get some things out of the way that most people hear when they hear somebody talk about prayer and fasting. And then I'm going to approach what we're going to cover in the upcoming series, because I hope this is refreshing, because the purpose of prayer and fasting is to get breakthrough. It's to hear from God the things that He wants done in you and through you, and then to talk to God about the things that you desire and the things that you need to know, see, hear, and do and have. Interaction, intensely focused interaction, intimate interaction with God, to be able to see, hear, do, and have what otherwise you wouldn't, and then to make things happen that would otherwise not happen. Could you imagine the impact after this series, if you can grasp some of the things that I'm going to tell you? What would happen if you can get breakthrough in those areas that seems to have come to a complete screeching, grinding halt? Your relationship with your children or your spouse, it's just got crazy trouble. You don't even understand. 2 weeks ago, it was fine, and now they're like aliens. They can't understand you, and turmoil at work, and you don't understand. You've hit a wall. You're running a business, and all of a sudden, the money's dried up. Business is completely dried up. You don't understand what's going on. You pray, you quote the scriptures that you know how to quote, and you do the disciplines that but nothing's working. Nothing's working. This is when you begin to know it's time for a shift, it's time for a change, it's time for you to acquire something that obviously right now you don't have because nothing's working. Here's some of the things I'm going to cover during the time. There are 4 topics. This is so important, and I want you to kind of look over the landscape of where you are in your life right now and be prepared to tune in either on all of these sessions that we're going to do or the one that comes to mind. We're going to pray for victory and breakthrough in 4 areas. The first is the prayer for hidden things to come to light. The prayer for hidden things. There are things that are hidden You can't see them, and they're hiding in the shadows, poised to hurt you. But there are also things hidden in the shadows that you cannot see that's designed to bless you. And if you're not aware of the direction you need to take to either avoid trouble or to move into that favored place because you just don't know what to do next, this prayer is for you. The prayer for hidden things to come to light. Then we're going to do some focused attention on the prayer for broken things to be repaired. Broken relationships, anything that's not working the way it ought to work. For all practical reasons, all the stuff is there. It's like Frankenstein's monster. All the body parts are there, but there's no life. Pray for broken things to be repaired. There are things that have been broken for a long time, and we've gotten used to them being so broke, we work around it. It's broke. You remember when I was a little kid, the TV didn't work right, so we'd smack it. Yeah, that's real scientific. Just go hit it. I'm sure you go to school to learn that. The prayer for broken things to be repaired. Then another area that requires some intensely focused, structured, and intimate interaction with God is the prayer for hurts to be healed. There are things that have happened to you maybe in your past, and to your knowledge, you put it out of your mind, so therefore you think it's not having an effect on you. You know, scars, I can look on our body. It's hard to live any length of time and not get a bump or a bruise or a scar. I can look at a scar and it brings back the memories of where that scar took place, and I remember, it takes me back to that day. One thing it doesn't take me back to is the pain of the scar. But spiritual wounds, emotional wounds, are not like physical wounds. Because an emotional wound can hurt just as bad today as it did 20 years ago when you first got wounded. And if you're not counseled properly, I don't know any natural counsel that can really do, they can help you cope. But only prayer and fasting can get you to a place where you're healed of that wound. The memory is there, but the pain is gone. Prayer and fasting, some intensely focused and structured and intimate interaction with God that brings about healing of past hurts. Then we're going to pray for wayward things to come to order, things that just won't work. They just won't behave. You work at it really, really hard, and all of a sudden you turn around, all your hard work, 6 days later, it's broke again, or it won't work again, or it's stubborn. This is the prayer that really moves into the area of addictive behavior, addictions, trying to quit smoking, trying to quit bad habits, bad things. You know you shouldn't do it, but you don't seem to be able to quit. Wayward things that you should be in control of, but those things have control over you. Prayer and fasting is the way to handle that. Prayer and fasting. It's not something that you do every day. It's not something perhaps that you go to work and talk to your friends about. Hey, did you pray and fast this weekend? What were your results? No. Prayer and fasting is a discipline that's been part of Christian culture and Bible culture for a long, long time, but there is the reality that in the culture in which we live from day to day, we are outsiders looking in. Unfortunately, when we pick up a Bible and we see introduced something we've never heard of, all of a sudden now we're at the mercy of trying to figure it out mentally and intellectually and do research and read books. But I want you to imagine growing up in a culture where that was just part of life. Fasting, you understood exactly what it was, not just an intellectual definition of it, but you know because your mom and dad and your grandma and as far as you know, everybody around you would fast, not just go hungry. Because if going hungry was a spiritual benefit, man, all you got to do is just skip a few meals and you'll be a spiritual giant. So fasting is more than just going without food. Fasting is deliberately putting yourself in a position through disciplines of sometimes sacrifice, turning down the noise, pushing away the plate, putting yourself in a place where you have to be able to hear. Fasting has been probably most effective throughout the years of simply pushing away the plate. Get out of the kitchen. Stop eating. Don't watch food TV and then try to fast. No, prayer. Get focused. Keep in mind, if you pick up your telephone and you're going to call a particular friend of yours, you already have in mind what you're going to talk about. Prayer is the talking part. But you know that any good conversation, any beneficial, interactive conversation has the listening aspect. That is the easiest way I can explain the benefit of fasting. Fasting puts you in a discipline where you do whatever it takes to turn down the noise of your life to be able to hear spiritually. Not to hear voices in your head, but to hear the voice of God speaking through his spirit within you. Now, if you're a new believer and all this stuff sounds like hocus pocus, or you're not a Christian and you have no idea, again, you're on the outside looking in, just trying to intellectually embrace the topic of prayer and fasting as though it's something that you can do like push-ups and you get good at it. No. Prayer and fasting is a relationship-based discipline because prayer is always to God. Fasting is always to hear God, even though the discipline of fasting is going without food or putting the physical body in a discipline of sacrifice, shutting down the distractions. In the little time we have left, and in the next episode, I'm going to focus on the prayer for hidden things to come to light. And then I'll go through all four of them. But right now, I just want to lay some foundation on what to expect and get on the same page of my definition of prayer and fasting. Prayer and fasting is an intensely focused, structured, and intimate interaction, two-way interaction with God in order to see what you otherwise cannot see, hear what you otherwise cannot hear, accomplish something that you would otherwise not be able to do, and then make happen. Set some things in motion in the earth because of that intimate, structured interaction with God. Something that was at a standstill is now in breakthrough mode because you stepped apart from the crowd, got quiet, and started talking to God with the expectation to hear. But the difference between prayer and fasting and ordinary prayer is that you're either dealing with something that's in crisis mode, something that's either so stubborn that up to now, nothing else works. As we explore the prayer for hidden things to come to light, it's going to be remarkable for you to discover that there are things literally hindering your breakthrough. And you will never naturally be able to see it apart from asking God to show you what's hiding. Let you hear what ought to be being said, but you can't hear it. Let me do something. What do I do? When you're in a crisis, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. You're hungry to take some action to make a difference. But the exciting part of prayer and fasting, and this is when you grow a little bit and you understand it, and perhaps you get beyond, I don't think any of us get beyond trying to get our needs met, because we're creatures of need, and the Lord knows that, and he's delighted to meet our need. But one of the exciting breakthroughs of prayer and fasting is when you become a tool in the Lord's hand to make things happen in the earth that would not otherwise happen. Because you put yourself in a discipline, in a mode, intensely focused, structured, and put yourself in the interactive mode with God for the purpose of seeing breakthrough, of seeing change, of making something happen. Prayer and fasting. Prayer, talking to God. Fasting, putting myself in a discipline and in a place where I can hear what I otherwise would not hear, see what I otherwise would not see, do what I otherwise would not do, and make things happen that otherwise would not happen. I'm going to give you a homework assignment before our next session. Perhaps you want to do this when nobody's home because it might seem a little weird. I did it with my kids and I made it fun, but I want you to try. This is your first approach to fasting. And before you push your plate away, I want you to try, turn off the lights, turn off the noise in your house, and for about 5 minutes, that's all, just 5 minutes, I want you to see how many things you can hear. And I want you to see and experience what it's like to try to deprive yourself of so much stuff going on around you. All the noise that happens. You're going to experience the first things that people do when they begin a serious approach to prayer and fasting. Turn off the lights, turn off the noise, and start hearing. Hearing is so important first because you can easily talk. You talk all the time. This little discipline that I played with my kids was to sharpen their sensitivity to begin to hear things around them, become familiar with their environment. And then once you do that, it'll be easy to carry over that discipline into hearing the voice of the Holy Spirit. Yeah, that's right. God has something to say. He's always talking. And it's not weird to actually talk to God and then hear from him. Now, we live in a world that thinks that's completely crazy because half of the world doesn't even believe in God. Or if they believe in a God, it's one they make up. But if you understand the living God and you read the Bible, you know that God has been a talking God from day one. He made Adam, and Adam talked to him, and he talked to God. So look, prayer and fasting is going to be a powerful session, and I want you to join me here next time, right here on Making Life Better for prayer and fasting. I'll see you next time.